Today we work on a 2005 Honda Accord with a J-Series V6. We're going to be doing the front brakes on this thing. Right there, there's the V6 engine. I'm going to be doing the front brakes on this. We're going to be doing pads and rotors. I'm actually going to be changing out the rotors. These rotors are too old to turn, or too thin I should say. We're going to be upgrading them to cross-drilled and slotted rotors from my buddies at ACR in Riverside, California. I'll put up their phone number right now. I'm just going to be doing one side because the other side is exactly the same. Doesn't take long at all. These are 19mm lug nuts. So loosen up those and then raise it up and then take the lug nuts off all the way. Here are the cross-drilled and slotted. Very nice. 19mm. Next, I like to take off the brake fluid reservoir because you're actually going to be pushing the pistons back into place, and you're going to have brake fluid that comes up from the bottom. So sometimes guys overfill these. The reason you want to take the cap off is just in case it is overfilled. There's a seal in there, you don't want to blow it out. And then it's also a good idea to go ahead and get a rag and cover it up. If you do get brake fluid on your car, or it starts to spill out a little bit, just get water from a hose or jar or jug and just pour water. Put the cap back on and pour water where the brake fluid spilled and you'll be fine. Water eats brake fluid. So I'm putting a rag on top. Okay, so next thing I want to do, right here, I can't turn it. Right here, you guys have screws that are used to hold in the rotor. I want to make sure that I can get those off before I take off the caliper and replace the brake pads. Because if you can't get these nuts off, or these screws, you're not going anywhere. So I picked these up from Harbor Freight. They're what I like about them is the shank goes all the way through. It's metal all the way through from this end to this end. So what I'll do is I'll get a hammer. You don't have to get one this big, but you basically put the screwdriver in place, and then usually it doesn't want to release. So I'll just take the end of it, hit the end of the screwdriver, and as I'm hitting, I'll just start turning it. See? Got it free. Do the next one. I picked these up from Harbor Freight, and I'll put a link in the description below where you can get them as well. Pretty cheap. Comes in a whole set. Come on, baby. Haha, I got that one off too. Excellent. I will actually reuse those when putting on the new rotor. Okay, next thing you want to do, we're going to spray this down with brake parts cleaner. Just depending on where you're working at. If you're working in a garage that has really nice concrete, you're going to want to put something underneath because brake dust in liquid form leaves big messes. So I'm just getting an old towel here that I don't care about. You guys don't want to breathe this in, so I like to spray off everything before I start dismantling it. I hope you guys can see this. It's early in the morning and the sun is just pouring down. This is your brake caliper. This is your brake caliper bracket. We have two 14mm bolts right here that need to come out. These are your slide pins. There's one up here. There's one here. They both have to come out. If you're just doing a pad exchange, you could pop one pin out, loosen up the other one, and flip this down and just swap out your pads. But you still have to, that doesn't allow you to re-grease the slide pins, which you always want to do. So quick tip, if you guys couldn't get these screws out, the rotor screws, if you couldn't get those out by the method I showed you, you can always heat it up with like a propane torch, or if you have access to an oxyacetylene torch, but just be careful because that thing gets really hot super quick. Or you could try some penetrating oil, and if all else fails, you can always drill it out. You get yourself a drill and just punch a hole down the center and get it loose that way. So just a couple tips, just a tip if you guys can't get that rotor screw out. So let me take you back here. One here, loosen those up. Okay, so you don't want to be hitting these up. I usually use the palm of my hand. Usually they're not that tight, but sometimes you got to get a hammer. So use the hammer. I'll use the wooden part right here. These suckers are tight. Okay, broke that loose. Do the same down here. They're exactly the same size, so don't worry about that. We're able to get our caliper out. Just place it up here on top. Your slide pins are in here, covered by a rubber boot. There's one of them. We'll go ahead and apply some new grease to that. And there's a second one. Now we got to get this caliper bracket off. Yep, 17. Usually these suckers are on here super tight, so. Oh, come on. It's not going to come. I'm going to use a breaker bar. 3/8 breaker bar. Just doing the same exact thing that I did with the caliper bolts. Just moving the socket to get a little bit better placement. Alright, so before I take that off totally, I'm going to get the lower one loose. This is for the brake caliper bracket. Okay, come on, move, baby. Going back and forth between breaker bars and ratchets. Okay, got the bottom one loose. Here's the other one. So let me show you these brake pads real quick. These things are worn down. You guys see that? Not much material left there. Sometimes if this is stuck on, go ahead and take your hammer. If you were going to be reusing this rotor, you'd want to hit the hammer between the studs for the lug nuts. But since I'm replacing it, I'm just hitting it around on the surface area. There we go. And also, it's a good idea, if you really wanted to get crazy, you go in here with a little metal grinder, grind all this rust away, put some anti-seize on there before you put the new rotor on. Here's new rotor. Get my little screws that we took out. The rotor screws. Some guys say not to reuse these, but I think it makes it easier. The job easier when the rotor is actually in place and secured. You can actually buy these little screws. Most auto parts stores. O'Reilly's would have them. AutoZone. Pep Boys. Napa. Alright, we have the caliper there. I'm going to prep the caliper. Going to grease the pins on here. Then I'm also going to grease, I'm going to clean up the part where the brake pad actually slides onto. Right here, that's where the brake slides on this metal bracket. So I'm going to clean that up with some brake cleaner. And then put some, I like to use Sil-Glyde from Napa. And then we'll put everything back together. Okay, so get the old brake pads out. There's one of them. Here's the other one. The sensor was on the inside, facing down, I believe. Okay, so next we'll go ahead and get some parts. Brake cleaner. Right there. Where they actually slide onto. Bring your towel in. Clean that up, wipe that off. Sometimes new hardware is supplied when you buy brake pads, but in this case they didn't give me new hardware. So clean that up to the best of your ability. Flip it over, do the same thing for the other one. And then we'll go in there with some Sil-Glyde, put a light coating, help the brake pads move a little bit easier. Okay. Clean that up. And pop these pins out. These aren't binding or sticking or seizing anything. They seem really good, so I'm just going to put a little bit of Sil-Glyde onto them and let them rock. If they were binding up or seizing or sticking somehow, You'd want to find out why they are. If it's rusted in there, you need to go ahead and take care of that rust. Just put a little bit on there, rub it around with your fingers, and put it back into place, and make sure your boot goes over. Do the same thing on this one. Okay, got some new grease on there. It's not grease, it's actually specifically designed for brake pins and brake pads. I'll put a link in the description below. Sil-Glyde from Napa. Good stuff. Okay, make sure those are moving freely. Okay, just grabbing a little bit of right here on my finger. Just putting a light coating. You don't want to gum this up. Put a whole lot of unnecessary on there. Alright. This caliper bracket is ready to rock and roll. Next thing we'll do is we'll go ahead, we'll push the pistons back into the caliper. And the way we do that, we use a 6-inch C-clamp and an old brake pad. Here's our caliper. Place it on top here. Don't let this ever hang from the brake line. I have one of the old brake pads here. You just slide it into place with your C-clamp, and then you're going to slowly collapse the piston back in. Just take your time, do it nice and slowly. You don't have to move fast. You're basically moving the brake fluid back up into the reservoir. Now some guys say, oh, open this up, open the brake bleeder screw. Don't do that. Don't ever open up a brake system unless you really have to. If you're changing out this caliper, go ahead, open it up so you can bleed it, but don't open these up. You just open a can of worms that you don't want to deal with, because then you got to get in there and bleed this system and blah 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 blah. It's just a hassle that you don't need or want. So I'm just slowly pushing it back. Don't try to rush it. And like I said, if brake fluid comes out of the brake bottle reservoir, just get some water and pour the water over where the brake fluid spills. But just make sure you don't get water into the brake reservoir itself. All right, we're bottomed out. I'll bring in the caliper, or the brake caliper bracket. Spray this off. So you bring your brake caliper bracket back into place. You're gonna put the 2 bolts back in there. Then you bring your brake pads in. You're gonna mount your brake caliper back in. And the next thing you want to do is, I'm not going to show you the other side. The other side is exactly the same. But then you want to go ahead, once you do the other side, make sure your brake reservoir is topped off. That's in place. If it's a little high, go ahead, drain some. You can use a turkey baster to pull some brake fluid out. And then after you do that, you're going to want to press your brake pedal with the car off 10 times, because the piston needs to come out and make contact with the brake pads, and then the brake pads need to make contact with the rotor. If you fail to do that, you're going to drive off and you're not going to have any brakes. So make sure you get in there before you drive anywhere, that you press your brake pedal 10 times. Alright guys, this is how you do a brake job, front brake job. Brake pads and rotors on the 2005 Honda Accord V6. I'm not going to show you the rest. You guys can figure it out. I'm not going to insult your intelligence. But if you found this video helpful, please consider subscribing to Bundys Garage. Questions, comments, concerns, you can always reach out to me at bundysgarage@gmail.com. You can follow me on Twitter. And like always, I'll keep them rolling for you.